this is the clicker, and then someone will give the clicker to Martin when you're finished with your slides.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. According to the tradition of Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, we're starting maximum 4 minutes after the allocated time of the start of the meeting, and we're doing it even better today because it's only 2 minutes after the allocated time. Welcome, everyone. I'm Bertrand de la Chapelle. I'm the Executive Director of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. It's a great pleasure to have you here. I will very quickly transition and give the floor so that we make the best of the 1 hour that we have. Thank you very much for coming here. It's a great opportunity, and I will immediately give the floor to Paul Fellinger, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, to launch the general presentation of this session.
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody, to this session. We are incredibly happy to have you here today at the Internet Governance Forum 2019 in Berlin. As you know, the vision of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network is to enable stakeholders to collaboratively address the transnational policy challenges of the digital 21st century to ensure policy coherence and coordination among initiatives, processes, and actors, bridging the digital economy, human rights, and cybersecurity. The Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, for those in the room, and I see many familiar faces, but those of you who don't know the organization yet, the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network is the connective tissue between more than 300 entities around the world. And you see here on this slide that includes governments, internet companies, international organizations, technical operators, academia, and civil society from more than 50 countries around the world. The mission of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network is threefold: inform, connect, advance. The policy network informs the debates by mutualizing knowledge and enable evidence-based policy innovation. The Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network connects stakeholders to build trust and coordination among them. And the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network advances concrete solutions. Stakeholders move towards legal interoperability in our work, which we will present to you today, and we will update you on the latest progress. If we talk about Inform, we are incredibly happy today to launch a new product of this multi-stakeholder policy network, which is the INJ Global Status Report to build capacities and map actors and initiatives. We will hear about this in just a few seconds. We also have, as an available resource for our community and the ecosystem, the INJ Retrospect database and regular newsletters to provide everybody with updates and trends to help everybody design better policies. And we have framing papers and policy outcomes to help frame the discussions and advance us towards solutions. We connect stakeholders by organizing events all around the world. We have organized, since 2012, more than 200 events in over 40 countries. Most notably the global conferences of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, to which we come in a second, and also regional and thematic events of our programs and in different regions around the world. As you all know, this year the third global conference of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network took place here in Berlin. It was hosted by the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy, and it was institutionally supported by 6 international organizations. And we will present to you during the session the outcomes of this conference, the proposals that were coming out of this. But before we go to this, I would like to give the floor to our host also of this United Nations Internet Governance Forum this year, Mr. Stefan Schnorr, who's the Director General for Digital and Innovation Policy. Please, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, dear Bertrand, dear Paul, and a great pleasure to have Winsoff here in this session today. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a great pleasure for me to be here, and I'm glad to be here again with the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. 4.5 months after the third global conference of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network has taken place in Berlin, in the Gasometer in Berlin-Schöneberg, an outstanding location and industrial monument of the early 20th century, not far from this place. So, as you see, this year is the Internet Governance Year in Germany. The conference by Internet and Jurisdiction in June has delivered important, concrete input for the debates here during the Internet Governance Forum 2019. The topics being discussed in the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network are highly current and hugely relevant. These days, we are witnessing a tendency towards a stronger national orientation and isolation of the Internet in some parts of the world. We really have to be aware of this, and this year's global conference was an excellent pre-event for this IGF to discuss those challenges. We would welcome in June more than 280 high-level participants from over 50 countries, including representatives of governments, internet business, civil society, technical communities, academia, and international organizations. It was vitally important that all stakeholders, not just governments, have thought about these topics and played their part in developing them. I think this is the multi-stakeholder approach as its best, and thank you again to Internet and Jurisdiction for this conference. Important questions that we have discussed were, for example, how do we deal with illegal content in the Internet? How does law enforcement and criminal investigation work when personal information is stored in a cloud and authorities do not have access to it because it is located abroad? Is it legitimate to block or prevent access to certain websites? And if it is so, what are the general criteria for initiating this? We are now at a stage that the network delivers concrete operational outcome, and this is exactly what has to be done if we want to tackle global challenges around the Internet. I'm very much looking forward to the imminent presentation of the first Internet and Jurisdiction Global Status Report. The Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, let me say this very clear, has once again done a very great job, and I welcome that very, very much. And it is also very important for Germany, because Germany is a worldwide, heavily interconnected economy. This is why it is so important for our country to have an open and global markets, free flow of goods, services, and of course, of data. However, constitutional principles and rules must also remain enforceable in the digital world. The Internet must not be declared a legal vacuum. But if you look, ladies and gentlemen, for institutions or organizations that provide concise and solution-oriented answers to these questions and challenges, you will directly come across the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. Therefore, and because of the solution-oriented work, the German federal government very much like to continue working with you, the Internet and Jurisdiction Network, and supporting you, and also bring the debate forward among the multi-stakeholder approach. I only can encourage others to also support the work of Internet and Jurisdiction, for it is one of the more promising attempts not only to gear us all towards consensus, or at least a very broad common understanding, but also to find concrete and operational solutions on currently upcoming challenges. Thanks again to Internet and Jurisdiction, to Bertrand and his team and all the experts that are involved in the discussion this year. We are looking forward to further cooperation, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan. It's very heartwarming to feel that what is being done is considered useful, which is basically the purpose of what we've undertaken. Actually, what you just said is a perfect segue to the next slides, because Paul mentioned the inform and the connect functions. I want to develop briefly on the advance part, which is fundamentally one of the core challenges is to make sure that the different actors, instead of considering that they have a problem with each other, consider that they have problems in common. And the second dimension is, if we want to be solutions-oriented, one of the first things is to identify very concrete issues, because we can discuss principles and general approaches, but it always needs to be anchored in something that is really concrete, that is hurting, and that is a common problem. And very early on, we identified, or more explicitly, actually, the people who participated in the work of the network helped identify 3 topics that are now the core of the 3 programs. The first topic is the cross-border access to e-evidence, and there was an excellent session that I was honored to participate in yesterday on this topic. And this is the data and jurisdiction program, and I want to take the opportunity to highlight that Hansol Park has just joined us, if you want to stand up, to head and to be the director of the data and jurisdiction program. So if you are particularly interested in this topic, please reach out to her. We're very honored to have her.
Also good.
Thank you. The second topic is the whole issue of cross-border content moderation and restriction and the responsibilities of intermediary platforms. This is a topic that a lot of you also are dealing with. And Frane Maurevich, who is here, is on the spotlight, has just joined the team, likewise in September, to head the content and jurisdiction program. So you identify Frane, and please connect with him. Okay. And to finish the landscape of concrete issues, the question is, when is it appropriate to act at the DNS level when dealing with activity or content that is abusive at the level of the websites underneath? And then Elisabeth Besudi, who is here, is the new director for the Domains and Jurisdiction Program. And so you will have the opportunity to connect with her. Yes, you can applaud.
It's important for the motivation.
I must say we are absolutely thrilled to have the three of them, and I will find a moment to introduce Sophie Tomlinson also, who has joined us later on. What is the purpose of those programs? Is to basically enable the actors to jointly develop policy standards. The Secretariat of the INJ Policy Network cannot develop the solutions on its own. It's not our responsibility. This is not our mandate. Our mandate is to help, or our mission, vision, is to help the actors develop the solutions together. And so if I go to the next element, what is the shape of those solutions? This is a voluntary exercise. Everything is voluntary. We're creating a safe space for the actor to explore the solution space. And the output of this is taking 3 forms. Operational norms, which are in conformity with what the former Nobel Prize winner in economics, Mr. Schelling, called focal points, is the things that could help the different actors organize their own behavior and their mutual relationships. They can be very simple formulations, can be a 2-liner, but it establishes the sort of operational norms, not high-level principles, but operational norms. The second element is operational criteria. Everybody who develops legislation or terms of service, or who implements or evaluates those rules, would benefit from a series of criteria, a series of cursors to identify what are the components of appropriate regimes and so on. And the third element is, in some cases, is the capacity to go and to propose operational mechanisms to deal with this. And it took the form of, in April, the contact groups that we have managed during the period 2018-2019 produced what we called operational approaches for the data, for the content and domains programs, presenting 34 norms, 31 criteria, and 3 proposed mechanisms that will continue to be developed in the contact groups for this year. And what is important in that regard is that I'll give you just a very quick example. On the domains and jurisdiction program, some of the criteria are regarding the types of abuses or what the complaints should contain. In the content is the concept of international normative coherence and geographically proportionate and relevant action. And on the data and jurisdiction program, there's a whole work going on legal interoperability and particularly the technical infrastructure that connects the law enforcement in one country and the internet operators in another country. We can develop this afterwards. If you have questions, we'll be happy to answer, but for the sake of time, I want to be concise here. So just quickly, we have launched currently in October the 3 new contact groups that contain about 40 people each. You can find, of course, the list of actors online. For each of the programs, there is a coordinator. In the case of the data and jurisdiction program, Robert Young, who's the legal counsel at in the Canadian Department of Global Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Canada. In the content and jurisdiction program, the coordinator is Wolfgang Schulz, who is the director for the Alexander von Humboldt Institute for Internet and Society, and somebody who has been very active in many processes, particularly in the context of the Council of Europe. And for the domains and jurisdiction, the new coordinator is Brian Symbolic, who is the Vice President and General Counsel of Public Internet Interest Registry. He has taken the position this year because the former coordinator for the domains and jurisdiction program was promoted to a much higher position, which is the chair of the ICANN board. And so we lost Martin Botterman for that reason. So that is, in a nutshell, the presentation I wanted to make. Yes, so that it's passed to Martin Hullin. This is basically the presentation of the activities in general. And what Martin will introduce now is the launch of the first global status report that is part of the work that we're doing to inform the debates. Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bertrand, and welcome again to everybody. Very glad to see many known faces and also people that contributed actively to what I'm about to present here, and we are very excited about it. My name is Martin Hullin. I'm Head of Operations and Partnership Manager at the Secretariat of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, and I had the privilege to coordinate the production of this pioneering effort. And as a first word of introduction, I wanted to explain to you first and foremost our thinking, why we actually initiate the work on this report. I mean, many cues were already mentioned, but we did it in reaction to an urgent call from our network, but also from beyond the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, for the need actually of mapping of the global initiatives to make sense of the proliferation of challenges, but also legal and technical approaches to what is out there. And this all manifested itself in this first of its kind overview and documentation of the past, current, and emerging trends, as well as most of the relevant actors and the proposed solution to those major cross-border legal policy challenges facing our connected societies today. We couldn't have done this without the support of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and GIZ. Same goes also for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Denmark, and not to forget also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Estonia, both of which we have also the privilege of welcoming 2 representatives that I'll introduce you to in a little bit. We also have received in-kind contributions from the European Commission, and all of these entities also have contributed actively to the content of the. And I here have to speak louder, even more. All right, I will pull it and I will speak louder. So, as we've mentioned, this is an exercise from the community for the community. So we have entrusted the internationally renowned Professor Dan Svendsen, who is at the Faculty of Law of Bond University and sitting right next to me, with the lead authorship of the report. And the Global Status Report follows a methodology that combines, of course, detailed desk research of all of the material that is out there, but we've combined it with a global data collection from over 150 key stakeholders that again range from the different groups that we are addressing states, internet companies, technical operators, civil society, academia, and international organizations from all 5 continents. And without their valuable insights, this report could have not been produced. And we thank them again here in this forum for their contributions, because next to the formal information that we've collected, especially informal and very timely available information that we were able to encapsulate in this snapshot of what really is in need to be addressed in 2019 and beyond. A small outlook before I hand over then to the author to share with you some of the key insights. So the Internet and Jurisdiction Global Status Report 2019 is the first edition of an ongoing global mapping exercise. It's only the beginning of the tour. We want to create a baseline on which future developments can be tested, to also assess if we have progressed, also assess if there's any need for realignment. We have started the production of a regional status report in partnership with the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, UNECLAC, and will release such a regional snapshot of the region in 2020. And I'm actually very pleased to also see Professor Carlos Afonso Sousa from ITS Rio today with us, who will be the author for this particular exercise. And if there's any interest to also contribute to this regional activity, he's here, and we are happy to talk to you as well. The second edition of the Internet and Jurisdiction Global Status Report is planned to be launched at the 4th Global Conference of our policy network in 2021. And without further ado, I would like now to hand over the microphone to Professor Svantesson to take us through the key findings of the report. Here you go.
Thank you very much. Writing the report made it very clear to me just how much there is at stake here, and it also made it clear that there's a lot of developments that I think going in the wrong direction. But not least through the interviews and the surveys, it was also very encouraging to see just how many people who now care about this field and actively participate in trying to find solutions. I started writing about internet jurisdiction issues in 2001, and it was a very lonely place to be and difficult to get anyone interested at all. But look at you all being here. That's wonderful. Now, as you can see from the slide here, oh, the other one?
Yes.
There we go. No? Don't leave a professor with one of these. Okay. So, okay, step by step. So, as you can see from the slide, stakeholders are feeling a growing concern about the abuses. They're feeling concerns about the proliferation of initiatives and about the legal uncertainty that dominates at the moment. And let's dig a little bit deeper about what's behind that, and let's do that through a sort of fictional situation. Let's say that you're already now bored with my presentation, and I am sure you're not, but I see some people on their phones. Maybe you're taking notes, but I'm not sure. Maybe some people are bored, and you're on your social media, and you're posting something rude about me and my boring presentation. Maybe even something slightly defamatory. Let's then say that I'm a highly vindictive person that would like to sue you. So then the question arises, what country's laws should you consider doing something like that, writing something slightly rude about me? Well, we're in Germany, so that's a good starting point. German law should be part of the laws you take account of. You might come from another country, that's another one to add to the mix. I'm from Sweden, but I live in Australia. That's another 2 countries' laws that you probably should take account of. I'm sure you all start every morning by checking the latest updates of the terms of service, and you would have seen that maybe US law perhaps might apply based on the terms of service that you agreed to. I have worked in a number of countries and have some reputation. It might not be a good reputation, but I have a reputation in numerous countries, and you could probably be sued in any of those countries for anything rude that you post. Then things get actually more complicated, because based on how choice of law works in relation to defamation, you should consider the laws of the places where your so-called friends on social media are located. And it's not enough to look at where they live. You need to actually know where your friends are at the time when you're posting this rude message about me. And unless you're seriously spying on your friends, that's a little bit of an impossible task, really, isn't it? So you can see that mapping out what laws actually apply to your online activities is complicated. And if we add The laws around republication, it gets more complicated because you need to know the law of a place where your friends are when they read your posting and so on. So there's a lesson in this. Don't write anything rude about me. But there's another lesson too, and it relates to what we talk about as the contextual legal environment. Is that on the next slide, perhaps? No, we'll say that. So anytime you do anything online, you're exposed to a number of laws from a number of countries, and you need to view them as a contextual legal environment or a contextual legal system that maps out your obligations. The problem there is often that we cannot, as in my example, we cannot know which laws apply to us. Even if we know what laws they are, how do you access them? Not all countries' laws are available online. And even if you can identify them and access them, law in Portuguese is useless to me because I just can't understand it. And if you can access the laws, identify, access, and understand the laws, there might still be contradictions saying that the laws of one country says you have to do something that the laws of another country says you're not allowed to do. So we need to map out, for anything we do online, we need to map out this environment. And some situations it might be easy, in others very complicated. And now I want to talk a little bit about the report. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but as a law professor, I'm used to getting to assign compulsory reading and recommended reading. And I would say, if you were my students, I would tell you that chapters 1, 2, and 4 are compulsory reading, and chapters 3 and 4 are recommended reading. Chapters 5 tries to give an insight into the type of legal concepts that are relevant in this setting. And chapter 3 contains details about jurisdictional issues in a wide range of topics, such as cybercrime, taxation, and so forth. So that's a little bit about what the report then tries to cover. Now, if you look at the surveys and the interviews, they pointed to a range of challenges. I thought everything would come up with one push. This is frustrating. But when they finally appear here, you will see a lot of challenges that I think none of them are going to surprise you particularly much. These are things we are aware of. There is clearly a lack of common agreement on substantive values, and I think that causes something that we can speak of as genuine regulatory challenges. But there's also a clear lack of shared understanding of key legal concepts, and that creates something different, something we can call artificial regulatory challenges. And I think we need to address those before we are in a position to address the first ones listed here. In other words, and this is something that the report is aimed to help with, we need to have a sort of common understanding of the challenges and the issues before we're able to address them. Because there's too much, in my view, there's too much talk at cross purposes in this arena, and we need to move forward on that, I think. Going to the next issue, there is also the report points to a dangerous spiral where attempts at solving these global problems are pursued through uncoordinated, reactive, and quick fix solutions from public and private initiatives. And they cause a lot of issues, as I'm trying to push and show you here. In the end, the environment that we face involves a setting where we're heading towards a rule of the strongest, and that's a real concern to me. And I think one of the strong takeaways here is an issue around that a lot of people from a lot of countries feel that they are just receivers of norms. They don't participate or don't get to participate fully in setting the norms. And I think that is something that comes up and frequently need to be addressed. In fact, I think the dominating players need to do more to properly try to assess the international implications of the approaches they adopt. And not only what will our impact be in other countries, but you need to start, they need to start considering what's going to happen if everyone else adopts the approaches that we are adopting. There's some interesting examples in the report of the issues that arise. So we sort of need some sort of mandatory impact assessment by the key players, assessing their impact when they adopt new approaches. Moving forward, perhaps the strongest message from the stakeholders related to the call for a greater coordination. And of all the sort of comments that we received, there's one that I found particularly relevant, and it's listed up here. There's one survey respondent that noted that the internet is neither the problem nor is it the cause of the problem here. The internet is the victim, or is at risk of becoming the victim. And I think that is a very, very important point. And if the internet is the victim, then we have to find out who's the villain. And I think our lack of appropriate coordination and governance mechanisms is one of those villains, at least. So something to work with. Right. So to finish off, at another occasion, when speaking about the report, I encourage people to go home and read it before going to bed. And that was a big mistake, because people sort of thought I was suggesting that the report is so boring that it's going to put you to sleep. But it's not at all what I'm saying here. I think go home, read the report, and most importantly, because this is an ongoing effort, give us feedback. That's the only way we're going to improve it. There is gaps, but you are the ones that can help us fill it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan. And again, we want to really thank Dan and also the colleagues that he had at the university for making the report happen. Those were 18 months of very, intense work, a lot of coordination with those 150 contributors, for whom, again, I would like to raise big thanks, because without them we couldn't have done it. And right now I would like to introduce you to Mrs. Henriette Kötter, who is Deputy Head of Division at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, responsible for e-governance, anti-corruption, and fighting illicit financial flows, which is a mouthful. Henriette, you have the floor, and also thank you again for supporting this exercise.
Yes, thank you very much, and congratulations to publishing the first Global Status Report. I think this is a really big achievement and a good baseline for all of us to work further on these issues. Germany is a keen supporter of the internet as we know it, and this shows especially that we are hosting this year's Internet Governance Forum and also the Global Conference of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network in June. We know that laws, rules and regulations will play a major role in determining whether the internet remains a tool for sustainable development. The Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development works closely with developing countries in the digitalization process. We aim for a digitalization that benefits each and everyone, and that goes specifically for marginalized and vulnerable groups. This can only be achieved through an inclusive process. Our interest in supporting this report was therefore threefold. Firstly, the internet serves people everywhere as a tool to gain knowledge, spread information, and reduce poverty. However, it needs proper regulation, so it can't be misused or create adverse effects. Secondly, while rules and legislation for using the internet are necessary to protect our rights and give guidance for online interactions, due to the internet's cross-border nature, as we have heard, with many regulations that come in, we are in need for a joint and inclusive debate about them. And we should not forget that still half of the world's population is not connected to the internet, and that especially women are facing inequalities in access to the internet and also in participation in the IT sector, and face off discriminations online if they are connected. Thirdly, regulations from dominant economies or rules of global companies often or can have a disproportionately negative effect on developing countries, the opportunities and people's rights to have a say in this debate. So representatives from these countries and from all stakeholder groups of these countries need to be part of the global discussion, just as they're here at the Internet Governance Forum, and Germany also ensured this participation from participants from the Global South by contributing to fund travel expenses. Our commitment will not end today. The German Development Corporation will support the regional report of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean and the Internet Jurisdiction Policy Network that Martin has mentioned earlier in order to develop the first regional Internet and jurisdiction status report. We are looking forward to see its results and conclusions and are encouraging everyone to join this crucial discussion. Multi-stakeholder formats like this are paramount to bring everyone together and to reach sustainable and inclusive solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to also again introduce to you Heli Timakla, who's the Ambassador at Large for Cyber Diplomacy of the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Estonia really is one of those trailblazing countries, and we couldn't be happier to also count amongst the first supporters of this pioneering initiative, really a coalition of those who are stepping forward to now trying to make a difference. So please, Mrs. Timakla, you have the floor.
Thank you, and congratulations on such a good and comprehensive report that you have been able to put together. We have been all dealing with the issues of internet and jurisdiction for some time, and I think the European nations have been all spearheading in this case. And the calls for more accountability and transparency in internet governance have been made, and we know that we also have to take some action towards the better accountable internet before it's too late. I also sit at a group of governmental experts of the United Nations First Committee, which will meet in 2 weeks' time in New York, where we are going to discuss cyber norms for major powers, and we will have the UN-based discussions going on cybersecurity, international law, cyber norms, and I have a pretty good sense of where those UN discussions are heading, also in terms of the different views and visions of different parts of the world, how the internet governance should look like. So therefore, I think our work here, in order to bring attention to the multi-stakeholder model, strengthened multi-stakeholder model, and how we can strengthen the multi-stakeholder model, is very timely. The report itself provides a very good snapshot of the existing landscape, and as such it can be also used as a resource for further capacity building and also a baseline for future studies. And I think the European Commission and some other EU countries have been also very active in the similar initiatives within the ICANN mechanisms, one of those being law enforcement working group within ICANN, which has been doing quite good recommendations for increasing accountability in internet governance. The concerns highlighted in the report on abuse and the questions of how we are seeing the issues of privacy, hate speech, data protection and harassment. Also the questions of how we keep up the rule of law in internet and how to better coordinate and what kind of frameworks we have for the better coordination. All these topics deserve further attention, certainly. And I think one of the realizations in the report was it's also important to provide the future recommendations how we can improve the situation. And this how is something that I would maybe end my short intervention here. I would call maybe the community in this room and also in a wider multi-stakeholder community to produce also the list of possible recommendations and solutions. Because I think we are still in a situation where the topics are discussed, the shortcomings are clarified, but we still need to work out a vision how to improve those shortcomings. So, and therefore, I think the work continues, and of course, on UN side, all the democratic governments stick together. We try to contribute to the multi-stakeholder model. But as the voting patterns in the UN First Committee and also in the Third Committee have shown us, roughly 88 countries are already stepping clearly on a more control side. And this is the dynamics in the more global, wider world. So I would just stress the conclusion in the report that now it's time to act. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We could not be more happy to release this report on the occasion of the IGF here in Berlin. Ladies and gentlemen, to make this report really useful for the ecosystem, it needs to get the widest readership possible. We want to build a coalition of actors around the world who will help us in future editions and contribute to data which is not available today. It is 2019 and this is the first time such an effort has been undertaken. If you are on Twitter or if you are on LinkedIn or any other networks, I would like to encourage you right now to take out your smartphones. Go to, on Twitter, @iJurisdiction, or on LinkedIn on the page of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, and follow them if you don't do so yet. And please retweet or reshare the posts that you find on those channels to help us spread the word. I take the opportunity before we open up for questions and comments to just briefly outline to you the way ahead for the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. As you will see on this slide here, and as you already heard, in 2020, there will not be a global conference of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, but global meetings of each of its 3 programs. And the 4th global conference of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network will take place in 2021. With regards to the organization of each of our programs, we could not be more happy to have such a great team and more human capacity in the Secretariat behind them. The work of the contact groups will continue, and I encourage everybody to follow closely the developments, and also under the leadership of our new directors, there will be the development of new, further enhanced engagement mechanisms to allow the largest number possible to participate in this work. And please, if you are interested in participating, our directors are here in the room, please talk to them after the session. And likewise, as Martin showed, the Global Status Report is a start of a global baseline, a global resource and capacity building. There will be the regional edition, the first regional edition for Latin America and the Caribbean next year, and a second global edition with hopefully many more contributors from around the world in 2021. I take also the opportunity to quickly thank all the supporters that make our work in the Secretariat of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network possible. Without them, this would not be possible. I want to thank our institutional supporters, the Council of Europe, the European Commission, ICANN, the OECD, United Nations, ECLAC, and UNESCO. And I want to give a special thank you also to the previous host governments of our global conference, France and Canada, and to the unique coalition of over 20 entities from all stakeholder groups who support our work on an ongoing basis.
Paul, if I may hijack your comment, I want to add one line, because they cannot be the logos and so on, but I want also to pay tribute and to give a big thanks to the people who have actually participated in the work, that have dedicated time in what we all know is extremely rare resource. We are all under pressure to dedicate and to allocate time to some activity or another. And I just want to share on that occasion, one, the gratitude to the people who have participated, particularly in the contact groups or who have come to the conferences. It was more than 140 people who participated in all the calls. And to pledge that we will continue to pay an enormous attention to the ratio of time to benefit. Because it is extremely important that whenever there are meetings, we make the maximum of it, whether they are virtual or physical meetings, that the time is well spent. So we commit that we try to be as efficient as possible in facilitating this work, so that the time you spend there is felt as being the most effective possible. But I just wanted to thank the people who participate, because otherwise there would be no such documents. This was developed by the participants.
Absolutely. So please download the Global Status Report. This should be a must-read for everybody who works in our policy field and wants to understand the ecosystem, and for everybody who is involved in whatever form or shape in developing policy framework, solutions, mechanisms, laws. Please have a look at the operational norms, criteria, and mechanisms, the suggested policy standards that came out and were presented at the third global conference this June. With that, I think...
Before we open for questions, because I know that people might be leaving briefly, I want to also allow you to recognize the other members of the team that I have not mentioned yet. There's Ajit Francis, who's here in the back, can raise his hand, who is managing the support and the policy manager for the policy work. There's Sophie Tomlinson, who has joined also in September from the International Chamber of Commerce to head the part on communications. And Hedwig, where is it? Yeah, Hedwig Lundström was here. And I'm very proud to say that this is a team of 9 people now, of 9 nationalities, from different regions, and gender balanced. So I'm extremely happy.
And with this, exactly, questions, please. The floor is open. I see, yeah, please, in the order, I hope I recognize. Vin, please, you have the floor, and then...
Thank you very much, and congratulations on an absolutely tremendous report. I just have 3 tiny points to make. The first one is to observe that accountability doesn't happen unless we can identify parties and then apply some kind of enforcement. So these are all tied together. The second thing is that what you are doing is policy design, and what we need from your work is policy design principles that lead to an interoperable framework. We're looking for insights. A third thing is that as we look at behaviors in the network that we don't like, we need to understand what the incentives are that drive those behaviors. It's important that we understand that, because unless we can change the incentives, we may not succeed in changing the behaviors. So we have to find incentives. Some could be positive and some could be negative. If we catch you doing this, there will be consequences and so on. Final point, and one that I am really glad to see, I haven't read the details, but cross-border access to evidence is an example of a very concrete thing that we must have in order to achieve the accountability that we're looking for. So this is real concrete progress, in my opinion, and I congratulate you for that.
Thank you very much. I think there was, yeah, Jorge, and then, yeah.
Thank you so much. Jorge Cancio, Swiss government. First of all, I wanted to restate our support for this initiative. I think we've been there from the very beginning, and we continue to think that this is a shining example of a vibrant policy network and the multi-stakeholder spirit. So we will continue to support it. To cut it short, I will endorse everything that our German colleagues said before, because we are completely aligned with those words. We think that this is a shared experience, a shared project of all of us, and we are very much looking forward to engaging in further work, and I appreciate what Bertrand said about the time ratio of the dedication involved, and I'm sure that with this enhanced team, we will give it the best dedication possible. And as I commented to Bertrand and Paul in June during the conference, we shared this with many colleagues in the Swiss administration, and we got very positive feedback, because this is really useful work. And I didn't tweet it 5 minutes ago, but be assured that now it's on the desk of our colleagues in Foreign Affairs and in the Ministry of Justice in Switzerland, and also my colleagues in the telecom department. So thank you very much, and we will keep on engaging. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and I encourage all of you to forward this to your colleagues and departments. Please.
I'm Tabriz Jafarov. I'm from Azerbaijan, but I'm a PhD researcher at Tübingen University, and I'm working on the thesis in the topic of the jurisdictional problems. First of all, thank you very much for your organizing conferences like this. I have not analyzed your report. I will analyze, and I think that I will find so many answers of my questions. But here I do not want to ask the questions. I wanted to add short comments that we have to be much more concrete on these problems because we are seeing so many problems online, on the social media and on the internet, but we have not, international norms to regulate this process. At least as a lawyer, I'm seeing this problem. And that's why I hope that in the next time we will be here not for the discussion in the common sense, for the concrete recommendations, the concrete offers, how we can do it, how we can create norms, and maybe we have to create by gathering, by collect all the states, all the stakeholders here. Like that, and I think that at least it is more important at least collect here and also to discuss some things, but being much more concrete it is so important. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And I encourage you to also have, in addition to the report, which I hope is also useful for researchers around the world, to have a look at the proposed norms, criteria, and mechanisms that you find as well on our website. I think the next hand that was raised was, no, the Brazil, no? Okay, then please, and then Martin.
Thank you. Qusay Al-Shati from Kuwait. First, thank you, Bertrand, and the wonderful team of Internet and Jurisdiction Network for such a wonderful report.
Closer.
Do you hear me clearly? Yeah. I wouldn't take that much of time. A question pops up. Do you find a difference between the word jurisdiction and sovereignty when it comes to data, content? Is there a difference, or it's regarded almost the same, or one is a subset of another? How is this regarded, or should be regarded?
Thank you for this question. We collect maybe a few more, and then please, Martin.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Martin Botterman. So this opportunity I would first like to use to, with great gratitude, thank both the Secretariat for doing this work and making it as easy as possible, as Bertrand explained, but also for the people from the context group on domains and jurisdiction for their very generous contributions in terms of time and also really opening up on what's really needed. I think the challenge for the coming years, and I'm sorry that I'll be less close to it, but I will continue to follow it, is to really make it operational, as the gentleman from Azerbaijan said. And the first step has been taken in even defining mechanisms of how to do so. And it's really worthwhile looking into. But to make this work requires commitment of people, as to get the real input to this process requires a commitment of people, multiple stakeholders, and people who are actually doing the work itself. So with that, I would like to encourage everybody who has an active interest in these trans-border issues to participate, to contribute, and to follow this with interest. You get as much out of it as you put into it. So thank you, and I encourage you very much to go on.
Thank you for those words. Are there any more interventions?
Let's take two, and then we can.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Paul. My name is Oscar Gonzalez. I'm from Argentina, from the government of Argentina. I just wanted to thank you for arranging this session. It has been great to see the progress you have made over the last 2 years. And although we are all very excited to get these operational solutions for the problems we are facing, it is amazing the progress that has been done considering the complexity of the issues we are all facing with the internet, content, domains, and data. So I very much appreciate the session, the great report, and I also encourage you to continue with the work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your kind words. Yes, Demi, please.
Just to add that Demi Ghetko from the Brazilian NIC, that I think this is the right way to go forward, and we thank you very, very much for all this work. I think we have a very good picture of where we are now, and this report adds a lot in our scenario. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to, I look around the table and the room, and I recognize what organizations are sitting here in the room, and it's amazing and humbling at the same time. And I want to encourage all of you to please have a look at the 34 norms, 31 criteria, and 3 proposed mechanisms. And when you design policies on those issues where those proposals fit, and if you use any of the norms, criteria, and even mechanisms in the designing of your policies, I would like to encourage you to please notify the Secretariat, because we also need to collect those stories of how it can be useful. It's very important for us going forward. With this, I would like to give the microphone back to Bertrand.
Thanks. So it's the moment to close this. I'm extremely thrilled to look around the room, see all the faces of people who have participated, and also to see new faces, which is exciting. I want to piggyback on one of the comments that Vint made, and it's an opportunity to make a distinction that actually give credit to Hedvig that I mentioned earlier, because during one of the lunches that we had bilaterally, she said something that it's not only about policy standards, it's also about standards for policy making. And I want to share this because it is exactly the 2 levels at which we're working. We're trying to deal with the concrete elements, but at the same time help the different actors understand the methodology of how to deal with those issues. And for those of you who have participated in the global conferences, you know that even the setup, the physical setup of the room is part of the methodology. And it's just tinkering with the protocols that are human protocols and procedural ones. Second thing is, regarding the e-evidence, again, to pick on what Vint has said, but also others, the fact that we deal with very concrete issues, in some cases, those are issues that have been lingering for a long time. It's the same for domains on DNS abuse. It's the same for e-evidence. One of the dangers is delaying the discussions and delaying addressing the problem concretely, because it's just like in healthcare. What can be treated relatively early on ends up being a major failure and a major challenge that requires surgery. And sometimes when you do surgery heavily, you can kill the patients when trying to cure it. And that's exactly what Dan was saying, here, the internet and the space and the cooperative space that we've seen and we've built together, which is honestly one of the greatest creations of mankind, is at risk of disappearing, not because it's not only because of evil people. Human nature is unchanged. There are evil people and there are good people. It doesn't matter. The thing is, when the institutions do not allow us to collectively address those issues, we have a fundamental problem. And I think the key message of the report is there is no alternative to coordination. And everybody knows it, and we're still all struggling at the level of procedures for policymaking on how to cooperate, how to coordinate, and how to develop things. And the final element is, and that's a whole discussion, is the Kusai's question on the connection with sovereignty. What is at stake is not the disappearance of sovereignty or the sovereign authority of states, etc. It's how sovereignty is being exercised in a digital age where fundamentally, the system that is based on territorial jurisdiction is challenged because most of the challenges are transborder. We have to manage commons when in the past we were dealing with separating sovereignties. And every time a national authority makes a decision that has to be extraterritorial, it is a challenge to the traditional vision of sovereignty, and understanding how the exercise of sovereignty and authority in the digital age is not only purely territorial, but also not purely exercised by public actors, but also in a certain regard by private entities, is one of the biggest challenges and one of the reasons why the multi-stakeholder approach is needed. So with that, we are within our criteria of 4-minute max after the allotted end of the session. Thank you so much for having come. It's like recharging the battery for the next year. Like the fact that you have all come here is giving us energy. Don't hesitate to connect with the people around the room. Leave your business card to people at the entrance from the team if you want to be kept informed, and enjoy the rest of this amazing IGF.